What is the scariest trust your gut feeling you felt before and glad you did so? I had to leave for an appointment and for some reason I felt the urge to just sit in my car before leaving. I've sat there just looking around for 2 minutes or so. Then the feeling went away and I left. When I was on the highway, I saw a crash happen just minutes before I was supposed to be there. Truck blew a tire, hit other cars which hit other cars as well. It was a mess. 2 people died. A few others heavily injured to the hospital. I was in the traffic behind the scene for about 2 hours and was so glad I just sat in my car just staring around before leaving. I still do that sometimes, thinking back to that moment. Not sure if it qualifies, but I used to live and work in the suburbs. One evening I was driving home at dusk. I was 18-19 and had the house to myself. Brother was out of town and mom was at her parents'. My job was about 10 miles from my house and maybe 6 turns on decently sized roads. I'm a fairly observant person and it wouldn't be odd for the same car to be behind me for half of those turns, but this time a car followed me all the way to my residential street. I got a gut feeling I was being followed, so I passed my house and turned left. My house was one over from the corner of another residential street that was a quarter-mile loop that also had another small street in it that reconnected to the loop then back to my street. This car followed me as I made a loop. I then turned right to restart the loop and it followed me again. This time I turned down the small street and completed the loop again. It followed me one more time. As I was about to make the loop for the 4th time, they finally drove off. I drove around another 5 minutes just to make sure they didn't circle back, as I had nowhere else to park except out front of my house, but I was creeped out the rest of the night. I slept with my door locked and barricaded and with a big kitchen knife. I have no idea if or why they followed me. Don't know if it was a friend pranking me or if my brother put one of his friends up to it, since it's the only time that's ever happened and it was quite coincidental that I was alone. I worked retail and some of the employees did have records, so I just don't know. So it wasn't my gut, but my friend's. I had noticed whenever she had a bad feeling, it almost always turned out to be correct. We were going to sneak out one night and ride in the back of a friend's truck like we did sometimes. She told me she had a bad feeling and I immediately backed out, and so did she. The others didn't listen, and that night the truck flipped with 2 of our friends in the back. They were both hospitalized for a couple of weeks. One shattered his arm so bad it never fully healed right, and one has full back scars from the road burn. When I was pregnant, I got bit by a Lyme tick at 28 weeks. Noticed the bullseye and got on antibiotics. My obgyn brushed it off after that, no harm done according to her. When I went to the hospital at 35 weeks to register for delivery, normal procedure here, I mentioned the Lyme but that I took ABX. Next day, they call me and tell me they want to induce at 37 weeks because Lyme can damage the placenta and they would rather not risk it. Oof. I talked to my obgyn about it and she basically laughed it off, telling me not to induce. My gut instinct told me to induce, so I went with the hospital's advice and had my son at 37 weeks. He was tiny and it was a tough few weeks after that getting him to eat and stuff because he was so tiny and tired. The hospital sent the placenta to pathology. It was severely damaged and wouldn't have held up much longer. If I had listened to my obgyn, I would have probably lost my son. Needless to say, I switched obgyns after that. In the days of MySpace, a girl I knew through high school extracurriculars posted a vague warning about an active duty sailor she met online who seemed normal but suddenly wouldn't take no for an answer. I messaged her to ask if she was okay and she told me his name, warning me not to engage with him if he tried to contact me. She then mentioned how she had been deleting some of her pics and profile details because she honestly thought he might try to show up where she worked or even at our shared after school activity. Literally the following week, I had shown up for said extracurricular and was in the process of setting up with a few other people. The girl was in the women's restroom down a long dark isolated hall far removed from the primary entryway. Out of nowhere, a guy who looked high schoolish in face and build, and could fit in with us only in that sense, but who I had never seen before, showed up and began looking around as if he knew the place and knew what he was after. I was used to other kids around my age dropping by to visit us out of curiosity, but they would normally just stand around awkwardly until approached. This guy's level of focus struck me as extremely disconcerting, and I couldn't shake this feeling that I needed to tell the girl first and any nearby adult. Because I felt so weirded out, I already knew I didn't want to talk to him, so I looked at the sign-in sheet at the entryway. He was the creeper the girl told me about. As soon as I knew that he couldn't take notice of where I was headed, I booked it down the hall toward the women's restroom, where I found the girl and told her what I saw and how I knew it was him. She started crying uncontrollably, and I told her to lock the door and that I was going to tell the adults in charge as soon as I could find them. I then found 2 of the adults and told them what I saw and knew of the situation. The fact that the guy in question was literally just in the other room from us, and that the girl had already locked herself in the bathroom. I was only 15. I don't know how I stayed so calm. The adults kicked right into action, escorting the guy off the premises and filing a police report. When I was a teen, I'd make a few bucks helping a local farmer bale hay. The hay would be stacked on a trailer and towed by tractor to the barn. I usually sat on the front of the trailer on the way to the barn, but I suddenly felt like that wasn't a good place to be, and I moved to the back. As soon as I did, I heard a clang. The hitch had come loose from the tractor while heading down a steep hill. I climbed down the back and easily stepped off moments before the trailer flipped over into a ravine. I used to work on a horse breeding ranch as a side gig. Your story reminds me of one of my own. I made pretty good money at the time. $20 cash an hour, working for 8 hours a day. I was in town one day picking up supplies for the owner, and I was approached by a grain silo manager. Like a co-op. The guy offered me a job while talking. He managed a co-op about 10 miles away. He offered me like $28 an hour, and I told him I'd think about it. It would have been a part-time gig, so I figured, hey sweet, more extra money. So on what should be my first day of working for this guy, a few days later, he calls me and tells me something came up and he's not going to be able to train me that day, so to come the next day. I'm just like, okay. Cool beans. A few hours later, the co-op blew up in a grain dust explosion and killed like 3 people. These people were all doing the job I would have been doing. I was once walking down a street at night and randomly thought to myself, yikes, I'm going to get mugged. I ignored the feeling. Got mugged. I did this. I felt unsafe and thought to myself, someone is going to harm me in this place. Actually said it to me friend with me. We ignored it. 2 minutes later, mugged at knife point. Not me, my grandfather. He used to never wear his seatbelt. One day he's driving around with my mom and suddenly remarks, I feel like I'm about to go through the windshield, and buckles in. Less than 30 seconds later, as they're going through an intersection, a car blows the red light going like 40 miles per hour and slams into my grandpa's side of the car. He walked away with nothing worse than some fractured ribs, and now he always wears his seatbelt. Leaving my headphones out when the Bluetooth spontaneously disconnected. A weird guy was following me home. I watched from my patio as he went up and down the street looking for me. A few weeks later, a woman has attacked in the area. Serious injuries. A good reminder for anyone to never run around with your hearing fully obstructed, for lots of reasons. Always have one ear available. Glad you're alright. I was walking home after getting the last bus. One part of the sidewalk went through a wooded area. It was a nice suburb, well lit, but I didn't like walking through that part, so would walk in the road. This particular night I got super freaked out, and everything in me told me to run past, on the opposite side of the road, so I did all the way to the next house and I ran up their driveway. I stood a while to catch my breath, hidden in the shadows, and just as I was about to start walking, berating myself for being paranoid, 2 men stepped out of the wooded area. Last March, before my father passed away, I called my mom to see if she got a text message I had sent her after not talking to her for almost a year. Something had told me to call her, and when I did, she told me she was on the way to the hospital because my father was at urgent care and had a heart attack while talking to the doctor, and another one in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. Later on that night we found out that he had a heart attack 2 weeks prior around Valentine's as well. Which is weird because around that time myself as well as my brother started having really bad chest pains to the point I told my husband I was about to go the ER and not wait for my appointment a week later. We also found out that he had CHF, a blood clot in his 8 lung and 2 clots in his heart. Sadly he passed away less than 2 months after finding this all out. After he passed away his cardio told my mother he had a genetic heart condition that myself and my siblings need to be checked. So I now have the same cardio as my dad and it's sad going in the office knowing my father was there. When I was about 15, I was walking home after dark with my high school boyfriend. As we crossed an intersection in the neighborhood behind my house, there were 3 guys walking, coming toward us on our left. About 20 seconds after we had passed them, I suddenly had the feeling to look behind us, and I noticed the guys had suddenly disappeared, had never crossed the intersection they had been approaching. When I scanned the area behind us, I saw a guy facing me, who then quickly stepped behind a tree. My boyfriend and I took off fast, cutting through yards and we made it back to my house. When we peeked out my back door to see if the guys had followed us, we saw them in my neighbor's yard, literally beating the bushes because they clearly thought we were hiding there. I called the cops, and when some old fart cop investigated, he came back to tell me they had found the guys, but they just thought you were pretty and wanted to know where you lived. Yeah, obviously, ducking douchebag cop. The cops just let them go, because it was innocent. Sure, they were searching for us in the bushes because they just thought I was pretty. Jesus Christ, I'm so glad I looked behind me that night. Felt sick one morning. Borderline whether it was enough to pull a sickie, I did call in sick. My colleague who always gave me a lift to work was involved in a head-on crash with a truck that veered lanes. He survived with minor injuries. The passenger seat was completely crumpled, seat to dashboard. Not me, but my daughter. We were at a mall and had just arrived at the food court. My daughter, 24, suddenly got agitated and said, "We have to leave. We have to leave now." I thought she was about to get sick and told her to head to the car, that I was going to get her siblings some lunch, and we'd be right out. She looked terrified and said, "No. We have to go now." I had no idea what was wrong, but we quickly went to the car. We were still in the parking lot 10 minutes later, waiting in traffic, when several police cars zoomed in with sirens going. Found out later a gang fight broke out in the food court where we'd just been. A dozen people were arrested. We have absolutely no idea what she picked up on. There was no yelling or angry voices, no groups gathering, no people who appeared to be anything but families getting lunch. But somehow she knew something was about to happen. This is my dad's story. My grandfather was old but in good health. Every night, my dad used to call my grandfather, tell him he's coming over, then go and spend an hour talking to my grandfather. One night he had this feeling. He had to go. Just had to go. He called and said he was coming. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then a series of really unlikely things happened. Walmart register transaction had some technical issues that took 15 minutes to sort out. Then there was an accident causing more traffic backup that added another delay. Then a third thing that I no longer remember. When my dad finally got to my grandfather's, my grandfather had died. As if he had simply fallen over in his bedroom mid-step. My dad, a physician, actually wonders to this day. What if he had shown up just 30 or 45 minutes earlier? I was driving a very remote road in rural Australia. No street lights, dead straight, pitch black, no other people for 100 plus kilometers. It was between Borktown and Julia Creek in far north Queensland. The song Cant Stop by the Red Hot Chili Peppers was playing and it repeated stop 3 times halfway through the song. I thought, ducking weird for Bluetooth to be messing around after it's been perfect for the last 8 hours of driving, but as I finished that thought, I had a feeling there was something more to it. So I slowed right down. I must have got to about 60 km/h when a herd of donkeys wandered onto the road. Had I been going the 120 kilometers I would have hit them no doubt and very likely been in quite a decent accident. I was going just slow enough to navigate them and ended up having to swerve onto the side of the road, which is just dirt. Any faster the car would have skidded and likely rolled. No cell phone signal and literally no one else around. Every time I hear that song, and particularly where it repeated, I get a wicked shiver and can only think if I hadn't slowed down it could have been a very poor outcome. Not my feeling, but my mom's a few weeks ago. She works near me and also lives near me and was going home at lunch to meet a plumber and offered to drive me to my house so I could let my dog out. I normally take the bus to work and then bus home at lunch and back, so the plan was for her to drive me home so I could walk my dog for a bit longer and then I'd take the bus back. But when we got to my house she said she thought she better just drive me back to work real quick, it's like 10 minutes, and then go meet the plumber. On our way back we saw ambulances and police cars going back towards my house. I pulled up the police scanner and we realized there was a shooting at my bus stop at the time I would have been waiting for the bus back to work. Not really the same, but a mom thing. When I was in kindergarten I walked home with my 4th grader sister and her best friend. It looked like it was going to rain as we were dismissed. My sister said she wished someone could come pick us up. I had brought my little pull-along phone to show and tell. I said I would call mom and my sister and friend said they wished it would work, but it wouldn't. My mom would only leave work if it was an emergency. Rain wasn't an emergency. We didn't make it half a mile from the school when the sky opened up with hail, thunder, and lightning. We had to take shelter on someone's porch as the storm raged. It didn't seem like it was going to stop and we decided to just run. We had just jumped off the porch when my mom's car turned onto the road. My mom had gotten a weird feeling and told her boss she really needed to pick us up and he told her to go. She went right back to work after taking us home. It wasn't like we hadn't walked home in storms before, so it was weird how it seemed like my phone call worked. Not sure if this constitutes the scariest, but there was a guy I used to go to community college with back in 2014 to 2016. Call him Mark. Mark was older than me by several years, and if memory serves, was studying political science. We had mutual friends and I'd see him at parties or at hangouts. Can't say he always gave me the creeps, but I definitely noticed there was something about him that was off. Ironically enough, he could be surprisingly charismatic and didn't have a difficult time with women despite not being the most handsome guy in the world. What really got me though was one time at a hangout, Mark and I got to talking. I said something to him that made him stop and stare me down. I stared back because I thought it was in jest, and then I noticed there just wasn't anything in his eyes. Like staring into black holes. Ducking tripped me out. Remarkably intelligent guy, too. And I'm almost ashamed to say that we ended up getting along for some time after that because I was never able to shake the off feeling he gave me. But I could only ever tolerate him in doses, so I kept him at a distance until I found out who he really was. Apparently, years before we ended up at community college together, he'd either been in some kind of frat or communal living where he threw this party and ended up raping a woman. Found this out through a close friend who knew him then, but who was beaten unconscious by the other people in the house before he could stop it from happening. He told me that Mark had apparently done psychedelics out in the desert with some friends prior to that incident, and when he got back he was just different. Obviously I ensured there was no contact between us anymore. Well, through mutual friends, I found out that a few years ago he murdered his mom. Dude had a psychotic break, killed her and dumped her body in his town's lake. Made the local news. Dude's still so out of it he's been put into the state's mental institution for the rest of his life. We were dumb teenagers in a van running from cops. My friend was driving and she pulled into an alley and we were booking down it. I got a weird feeling and screamed out stop. She slammed on the brakes, we stopped, held the lights and peeked watching as the cop car blew past us back out on the road. We got out and realized we had almost slammed into a loading dock. I'd been feeling the decline through my adrenaline and my mind put it together before I even consciously realized why there would be a decline. I went in a hiking trip around Iceland with my best friend after finishing school. Tickets directly to Iceland were crazy expensive, but there was a cheaper option. We booked flights to New York via Iceland, with the option to stay in Iceland for 4 weeks, and then just do 3 days in New York. So after our hiking trip was finished, my friend had a super bad feeling about going to New York. So bad, that she begged her parents to send us money for a direct flights home, and we did. Well, that was in September 2001. When I was 19 I came home from college. My parents went on vacation for a week and asked me to house sit for them for 2 days. Both of my siblings were also away in other parts of the country. We lived way out in the countryside. We knew all our neighbors, good folk, but the nearest neighbor was almost 1 mile away. On the second night, I got this really strange feeling of uneasiness, which was weird because I grew up in this house and had been home alone many times as a teenager. But the feeling that something was going to happen was just incredibly strong, overwhelming even. So I grabbed one of my dad's rifles and took it to my room upstairs. I loaded the rifle but did not big dig it. I stood it in the corner next to my bed and went to sleep uneasy. I have never done this before or since. At around 3 AM I was awoken by someone in the house walking around downstairs. I heard them walk up the stairs. They came to the platform before my room where there is 2 more steps. At this point I quietly got out of bed and grabbed the rifle, got behind the bed, and aimed it at the door. I heard them climb those 2 steps to my room. As they started to turn the doorknob I pulled the spring-loaded action to engage around, which made a loud, audible click. I saw the doorknob turn back, keeping the door shut, and heard the person bolt down the stairs and run out of the house. After a while, I took the rifle and went room to room, but I knew they were gone. Nothing was missing or stolen. 24 years later I have no idea who broke into our house and why, or why whoever it was came to my room at 3 AM. I am glad whoever it was didn't, because they likely wouldn't be alive. But the weirdest thing was that weird, uneasy feeling I felt the night before. I was helping my friend with her move to a new apartment with her fiance. We worked together, and at the time, she came into my office asking me to go with them to this furniture store, so I said yes. Right before we were leaving, I had this really bad gut feeling. I didn't know what it was, but I was exhausted, so I chalked it up to just that. About an hour later, I was in my living room, on my phone, windows all open, as the electricity was cut off. It's a normal thing in our country, and a huge explosion ripped through the city. I flew off my couch, hid my face on the granite tabletop, and chipped my tooth. I was disoriented for a few minutes when another explosion happened. I looked outside the window. Every single window in every building in my vicinity was shattered to a million pieces, and I started looking for signs of what had happened, and saw a huge cloud from the site of the explosion, and I knew my friend and her fiancé were nearby. The lights were down, people were in a panic, and there were police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks everywhere. They both got badly injured, but thankfully, they made it. Had I gone with them, I probably could have gotten injured, too, or died. Thank God I was so exhausted that day, and thank God for the electricity being out, and me having opened the windows. Otherwise, glass from the window, which surprisingly didn't break, could have killed me. The other windows all shattered, too. Mill got a new boyfriend. He had so many stories about his wealth and his amazing job as underwater welder. Everybody liked him, but me and the MRS could not put a finger on why we did not believe his stories. Until I remember a comment from my wealthy stepfather. If you are wealthy and drive a really nice car that you had to bring in for repairs, you will not accept a beat up loaner from the dealer where it is being repaired. He said this because of a similar story a friend of Hick was involved with. The boyfriend drove a horrible car and it did not make sense at all. Months later he actually turned up in a nice Mercedes Benz when he wanted to take us out for dinner. Guess what I learned in the days after? He tricked Mill to steal her money from a sale of her house on one of his bank accounts. After my research was done, I concluded this man was broke, living with his girlfriend and subscribed to 10 dating sites to trick women to part with their money. Pulled up to a set of lights and hesitated for a second when mine turned green, only for someone to immediately run their own red light while speeding. They'd have hit me driver side on, wound up chasing them for a bit before giving up. LMAO. Pretty similar to the time someone did the same thing and actually hit me, probably where the gut feeling came from. I was driving behind a pickup truck that had a mattress on the back. That always makes me nervous, but then I noticed how it was tied down. Slowed down to get some distance and lo and behold, the rope snapped. I seamlessly swerved into the next lane to avoid getting hit. I'm just happy no one was behind me, or in my way. Edit. I'm also proud of it because it was one of the few times I did something cool while driving. A couple of years back during a tumultuous breakup, after attempting, and failing to amicably retrieve my sheet, my father and cousin had volunteered to drive me to my ex to fetch my belongings. All was set, 6 PM straight after work. Angry dad's convoy to this man's gate with a cop to de-escalate just in case someone lost their mind, and I will never forget how upset my father was about the whole situation and how adamant he was in getting my sheet back, even though I was ready to let it go because I felt something was off about it all. Day comes around. 10 minutes before I need to leave the house to drive the angry dads to his gate, dad walks in calm but visibly unsettled and says, "Let it go. Let him have your things. Let him have his way. This is not worth it. You are worth more than those things." I was so confused and insistent. Old man just said, "No one is going nowhere. Do not ever go back there. Let it go, move on." Years later, about 3 after the fact, come to casually find out through him over a now deleted chaotic voice note that he had hacked my phone and knew I would be driving by that afternoon and was leaving the country for uni, and his new girl pretend left him after she found out about me, so he was not that happy about that, so he left work early that day, picked up his dad's gun, loaded it and was waiting for me to show up, but I never did and he just was just kidding. I would never. I ask my dad about why we never went and he always says he felt a sense of dread in his gut but he did not know why. A couple of times it trusted my gut and it saved me. Once was in high school. I had started experimenting with LSD and I really ducking loved it. Still do actually, just don't partake that often. Anyway, I had a vial with me, around 50 or so doses, and there was a rave that was scheduled for that night. I'd received maybe a dozen calls confirming that I'd be there, and obviously I said yes. As I was about to leave the house, something told me to not go, and I listened. I went back up to my room, turned my cell phone off and went to sleep. Woke up in the morning to over 200 messages. The narcotics department had showed up at the rave and arrested a lot of people, even for like a joint or two. Had I been caught, my life would have been over. I stopped selling that day, and only share with my closest friends. Another incident a few years ago. My girlfriend and I were holidaying in Croatia. A friend of hers had also joined us. They are both really tiny, like 5 feet maybe 40 kilograms, so I'm always careful when I'm out with them because they just seem like easy targets, especially in new places where I don't know the language. We were in a city called Split, and decided to go bar hopping. Met some locals at one of the bars and we were ordering shots. Something told me to randomly keep switching drinks with the girls, just in case. Just in case was ducking right. The drinks had been spiked. I'm not sure if they were meant for me or one of the girls, but my girlfriend was done. She can handle her drinks, but this was something else. It took a while to hit her, but by the time it did we were at another bar. She was totally blackout drunk. Suddenly I see one of the locals from the bar we were at earlier, and that freaked me out for some reason. He came up to me and said there's a party at his place and we should go with him. I'm pretty high, so I was like okay. As we were heading out I see these absolute giant guys from the corner of my eye and it looked like they're following us. I immediately turned to both the girls and told them to go to the restroom, in our native language. Then I tell this guy I'll meet him in a second and I go towards the restroom too. Every single instinct is screaming at me to get everyone out of there and back to our apartment, and I did exactly that. I literally had to carry my girlfriend out of there. We didn't find a cab but we just kept walking. I have no idea what would have happened had I not listened, but I've come to realize that you don't duck around and find out. When I worked at Walmart there was a night that a man was following me around the store. I asked him politely if he needed help. He said no and continued to hang around me. It creeped me out, so I called my husband and told him instead of sitting in the car waiting for me to come out, I needed him to come into the store. He did this, and as we were walking out, the guy was waiting outside for me. Later in the week he did the same thing to a coworker, only when she went to leave he grabbed her arm and tried to pull her to his car. I'm so glad that I trusted my gut that he was dangerous. My mom and aunts always told me growing up to listen to that gut instinct when it came to a man. That advice has saved me more times than I could count. As a kid, for some reason I used to like watching and talking to blue collar workers. One time when I was 7, there was this guy who used to wash cars around our area, and whenever I'd see him while riding my bicycle I'd stop to see what he's doing and maybe have a word. But one day, he really wanted me to go somewhere with him. I think it was an invitation to his house. Now I feel really stupid for this, but I reluctantly agreed and went with him. He did kinda pressure me into it with anger, but I was too small to realize. So as we were riding we came across a house that I recognized to be the place we lived in a while ago. I told him that and he seemed hesitant. Somehow that hesitation was what gave me the red flag, and I snapped out of it and started driving back. As soon as I did that and he noticed, he started yelling out to me. This scared me even more, so I didn't look back and just rode back home safely. I never really met him again, not that I can remember. This is my speculation, but maybe he stopped working in the area fearing I might tell my parents and inform the cops, and the cops would catch him when he's seen nearby, but you be the judge. But hey, still alive and breathing. I possibly dodged a bullet that day, but who knows. Was a dumb kid for sure. Just out for a walk in the neighborhood and this guy immediately caught my attention. Walked weird. Acted overly casual. I went last minute into a street to see if he would follow, and he did. He was going a different way and changed his direction when I changed mine suddenly. Luckily there were 2 more random people on said street. I walked a bit faster to catch up to them. The street ended on a busier street and he then went back the way he came from. We're talking Saturday mid-morning. I was with my baby son. Maybe it was nothing, but I wasn't going to stick around to find out. I didn't even realize that it was any gut feeling. My bedroom is up in the attic. Usually, when I go up there, I always close the door and immediately turn on the TV. With the door closed and especially with the TV on, I don't hear anything going on in the rest of the house, like the doorbell, phones ringing, people yelling dart. The one time I left the door open and TV off was the time my dad was struggling to get out of the bathtub, so I actually heard him yelling. Not me, but my mother has strong mother's intuition. Sometimes I'll ask her, before doing something risky, how her gut feels. For example, when my brother and I were kids, we wanted to join the local Boy Scouts chapter. We saw a man standing outside of a grocery store signing people up. We begged and begged her and she said no. She said a group of grown men taking young boys into the woods with limited contact to their parents wasn't her thing, and that the man signing people up made her nervous. Turns out our specific chapter had been sexually assaulting little boys for 2 decades. She lost her shit when it was on the news a year later. Another example, my mom, grandmother, cousin, and cousin's boyfriend went to the beach with me one day. My cousin was so cool to me, aren't they all, and her boyfriend seemed chill. I wanted to ride home with them, but my mom said no because they'd been drinking. When I asked her again, she looked really scared and started yelling, saying there is no ducking where you're getting in that car. So I rode home with my mom and grandma. Right behind us they got in a nasty accident. The boyfriend was in the back seat and ended up upside down in the front passenger seat. The back of the car next to him, exactly where I would have been sitting, was gone. Literally ripped from the car and shredded apart. I would have died. Last example is tragic. One of my older cousins has some substance abuse issues. Her and her husband did. They just had a baby, and my mom was one of the first people to see the little boy. Even my aunt, cousin's mother, didn't see the baby yet. My mom took one look at him and saw some things that worried her. She told them both repeatedly to take him to the hospital because something was wrong. They ignored her. The baby died very soon after that, at most 2 weeks later. I have a few, but honestly the scariest one wasn't actually me. I was babysitting for a couple who were friends of my parents and the dad was a semi-truck driver. That morning the mom was crying and it was honestly very unnerving to me, and the dad, since she was a bad smoker mom archetype, she never cried for any reason. I just remember her holding on to him and begging him not to go to work because something felt wrong. When he asked me what he should do, I DKY he did because I was only 19. I told him to trust his wife. I took the kids into their room and we played games for a while until the dad came in and said we were going out for dinner. So I went with them and handled the kids so they could have a sort of date. That next morning I get a call from the dad thanking me over and over. I finally got the story out of him. That morning his driving partner fell asleep behind the wheel. The father of the kids I babysat would have been sleeping in the back during that shift, but the woman who replaced him for that trip was napping in the front. It saved both their lives. The back of the truck had been absolutely caved in by another trucker since the guy who fell asleep woke up and slammed the brakes to not hit the medium of the highway. I've had some intuition moments and close calls, but nothing has ever touched that.